I want to talk about the concept of privilege. Now, we often hear about white privilege, and white privilege is largely bogus. One easy indication that white privilege is not very operative today is simply ask yourself the question, in which direction are people trying to, quote, pass? So to pass is to pretend to be a member of the other race. By the way, about 100 years ago, lots of people who were black or mixed race would try to pass as white. Why? Because all the privilege then, let's just say in 1921, was in fact white privilege. But today you notice that from Elizabeth Warren to Rachel Dolezal to many others, people are trying to pass themselves off as something else, pass themselves off as black, pass themselves off as Latino, pass themselves off as Native American. And that's because quite obviously the legal privilege, the benefits for college admissions and government grants and promotions, and even the social chic is with, you may say, minority privilege. But I want to talk about other types of privilege. I've talked before about American privilege, the privilege of being an American in the world. And that's a privilege that was very real. I think it still is real, but it was even more real between the 1940s, the end of World War II, and I would say perhaps the election of Barack Obama, because what's been happening under Obama and now continuing under Biden is an effort, and I think it is largely a conscious effort, an ideological effort to unwind, to undo American privilege. I want to talk today, however, about a different kind of privilege, and it's the privilege of being raised in a nuclear or two-parent family. Now, there's a whole body of research on the importance of being raised in a family. And I recognize that when I use the term family, family structures can differ over time. There is no one kind of fixed recipe. Just to give you an example, I grew up in a country that has more extended families than nuclear families. You walk into the typical Hindu home in India, and it's not a dad and mom and two kids. That is the case in some families, but I would say in the majority, you will find grandparents, you will find three brothers living under the same roof with their wives and their children. So this kind of extended family is the Hindu, and to some degree the Indian norm. And of course, I recognize with divorce, with other things, family structures can be somewhat varied. But that being said, there's no doubt that children benefit enormously from being raised in a family with two parents, a dad and a mom ideally, that are looking after you and that give you their the benefit of their labor, their effort, their savings. They provide for you, they look after you, they put time into you, they invest in you. And other family structures, single parent families, for example, or foster care, you don't quite have the same thing. And even though single moms may be working heroically to try to do multiple jobs, it's not as easy as I think these moms would be the first to tell you. Now, the strength of America is the strength of its families. And all of this is a way of saying that the nuclear family, which was once really the norm in America, has been shrinking. Here's an article based upon the latest government data. Just 18% of U.S. households today would be considered, quote, nuclear families with a married couple and children. Now, this is down from 40% in the 1970s. And what we find that there are a bunch of factors causing this. One is that women are marrying much later. Men are marrying much later. The fertility rate is down. Many more Americans are living alone. The percentage of adults in the U.S. living with a spouse is down 50% from 10 years ago. Wow. So you have a lot of places, not just single moms with kids, but single dads or just single men living just by themselves. And there's a trend that is away from marriage and away from the nuclear family. In 2021, 34% of those over age 15 have reported never being married. That's up from 23% in 1950. So these are important and lasting changes. And now, The family crisis a generation ago, in fact, in the 1960s, was mainly thought to be a crisis of the black family. Former Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, now dead, but Daniel Patrick Moynihan did a famous report on what he called the Negro family, I believe in 1965. And he said there's a crisis of the Negro family. The illegitimacy rate for blacks in the country is 25%. And people were a little shocked. Now, of course, some leftists tried to blame this on slavery. Slavery destroyed the black family. And this is patent nonsense. Yes, slavery put great stress on the black family when slavery existed. But after slavery, blacks made a heroic effort to reunite their families. And the black family structure between, say, 1900 and 1965 was pretty good. Yes, the black illegitimacy rate was higher than the white rate, which was very low, 4 or 5% at the time. But nevertheless, most black families were intact families. Now, here's the real shocker, that if you fast forward to the present, you discover that the white illegitimacy rate today is higher than the black rate was in 1965 when Moynihan did his report. So the illegitimacy rate for whites today is in the 30 to 35%. It depends on whether or not you count Hispanics in this or whether you count them separately. And the black illegitimacy rate has just gone through the roof. It's now something hovering around 70 to 75%. So this means that the vast majority of black kids are not raised in a nuclear family. You have lots of children and youths growing up without their biological fathers. Now, when I think back to growing up in India, I think about the fact that, yes, I grew up in a middle-class home, but there were lots of kids who went to our school, smart kids, hardworking kids, kids who made something of themselves. And they were much poorer than my family. In fact, they would have one meal a day and then just have a little bit of a snack to kind of tide them over. And nevertheless, these were kids who had a dad and they had a mom. And that's what really mattered. That was their privilege, even in a third world country. And I think so it is in America today. When I look at some of the broken families and some of these kids who migrate towards gangs, migrate towards violence, toward drugs. Of course, they're responsible for their own actions. I don't mean to imply that they're not. But this is a problem rooted in the breakdown of the family. Now, there's a political implication of this that I want to spell out, and that's this. By and large, if you find a married couple with children, and you test their politics, there's a very good chance that they're going to be voting Republican. They're going to be leaning or solid Republican. You find a married couple without children, and they're going to be politically harder to call. They are probably going to be more toward the center, a little more difficult to predict. They fall on either side of the fence. You look at someone who's divorced or a single-parent mom, chances are that they're going to be leaning or solid Democratic. So what I'm getting at is that there is a correlation between family structure and political affinity. And that means that the GOP, the Republican Party, for more reasons than wanting to heal the country, wanting to heal the culture, wanting to give kids a better life, all of that is true, but also to protect itself for its own political self-interest. The GOP, the Republican Party, has a direct stake in the culture war.